welcome to the Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm Jessica Ausbrook, and this is Kim Grace. We're from Solidarity Community Federal Credit Union.
Hi, you kind of gave that with a little punch, didn't you?
Credit Union?
Credit Union.
Credit Union.
Yeah.
We still haven't perfected our over-the-hand clap, by the way.
Oh, there we go.
Got that. Solidarity Sisters, we're here. We're ready, and we have a very special guest with us today.
We do. Susan is here with Narrowgate Horse Ranch. Hey, thanks for being our guest today. And I am looking at these pictures. I don't know if you can see, but this is Pumpkin. I love this. He's a mini. She's a mini. She's a mini, and she is adorable. And this is Jethro.
And he is a mini, but he thinks he's a big horse.
Oh,
He's the alpha.
My gosh. They are beautiful.
Thank you. We love them.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Narrowgate, please.
Oh, gosh. So we've been up and running almost 9 years. 2016 spring is when we started.
That was 9 years ago.
Yeah. Actually, it really started in 2015, just getting everything, having meetings, seeing if this is something the community would support. But it really all came out of, I volunteered almost from the very beginning at Urban Outreach, and that's where I really got to understand what poverty is, working with the kids there. And so anyway, I could go into it. We could talk for hours about this, but I got to know the kids, and then I started a class for the older kids, which means 4th grade and up. So I started working with those kids, and then I realized, some of them wouldn't come. They'd come to eat a meal, but they wouldn't come up to my class afterwards. And I'm like, how can I keep these? I was just like praying, how do I keep these kids coming? And I remembered about a program I had heard on the radio. It was a Christian radio station years before. And that popped into my mind. And I thought, gosh, I wonder if there's anything like that around here. And it was a horse ranch. And it was a therapeutic, it was a ministry, but it was therapeutic. And I stood in my kitchen listening to this lady talk about these kids that came to her horse ranch and all of the changes that were made in their lives just from working with her horses. And I'm like, so I started calling around, found some places. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but they did work with kids and horses. And so that's how it started. It was just, the truth is, it was a bribe. It was a way to keep them coming.
I was just going to say, what do we do to keep them here? A mini horse, that's it. Horse.
It was like, okay. And so it was like, okay, whoever shows up the most for my class on Sunday night gets to go to the horse ranch in the summer because there's only so many seats in the van.
Sure.
And so whoever shows up the most gets to come. So that's how it started. Because I am not a horse person. I have learned to be over years.
I didn't know that. I guess I thought you might have been.
I know. People always think that. And it's like, no.
But how can you resist this face?
Exactly. And I've learned
seriously.
I've probably got more head knowledge than I will ever have practical knowledge, but we have several people now that we call our equine specialists. Our program director, she's an equine specialist. And so it's just, God has brought all these amazing people with different gifts and talents together. I would say I was the kid specialist because at this point, I'd been working with these kids for a long time. But you just feel like, they become your kids. And these are kids that are having a lot of behavioral issues, a lot of emotional issues. But when you get to know them and you just see their environments and how they're raised, it's almost hard to believe that right here in little old Kokomo, Indiana, that we have kids living in this kind of poverty and the struggles. And what I learned early on was it's a different culture. It truly is a different, it's a different culture within our culture. They don't talk like us. I learned a lot from these kids. We think we help them and teach them, but we learn a lot too.
And they're teaching us.
So a lot of them, it's, you can imagine there's a lot of trust issues, a lot of, when we first started, it was funny because the only kids that came to that program, to Urban Outreach, were the little toddlers, literally, because they didn't trust us. You have to earn the trust. Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing with the horses. You have to earn their trust. And so much that one of the first things I would say to kids when they come to the ranch is, let me tell you something about horses. they will never lie to you. And I started getting big eyes, and I'm like, whoa, I hit something here. I hit a vein here, And because they lie a lot of times just to survive, And but then I go on to say, but you can't fool them. And they kind of look at me, and I said, do you know what I mean by that? And they're like, no. And I said, okay. I said, well, I said, as people, we can, and I explain it in their language, but basically as humans, we wear masks. We can come in, upset or angry and put on a big smile, and you guys think everything's okay with me. Boy, she's just so happy. But in fact, maybe, or I tell the kids, maybe you just had a fight with somebody in the van on the way here and you're really angry, but you walk into the classroom and I ask how you are and you say, oh, I'm just great, Miss Susie. Well, you fool me, but I just want you to understand, when you go out to work with your horse, you won't fool your horse. Horses are very empathic and they sense what's going on inside of us. So, and the thing is, they don't care if you're mad. They don't care if you're angry. What they care about is there's a discrepancy there. You've got a smile on your face, but they sense that inside you're angry, and they're like, I can't trust this person because they're not being honest.
I didn't think I ever realized.
I didn't know that.
There was there's such a connection between humans and horses, but I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a great thing right there with these kids, because they aren't honest, because they can't trust. And so we tell them, listen, when you come in to work with your horse, just tell your horse how you feel. And you can say it out loud, or you can just whisper it under your voice. And honestly, you can even just think it, because you're even admitting to yourself, listen, I'm angry, or I'm scared, and just even thinking that, the horse will sense that and pick up on that. It's really a cool thing. And they want their horse to work with them. So that right there, just getting kids to be honest is great, versus going to, say, therapy. And, a lot of these kids have been in therapy since they're 3 or 4 years old. And so you take them to a therapist and they put their elbows on. I've seen them. They'll put their elbows on the table and look at you like, make me talk. But when you're with the horses, the difference is we're talking about the horses. So what equine assisted learning is you use horses to create metaphors, to start discussions about what's that horse doing. But ultimately, in the long run, you start talking about them and how that, how can you apply this to your life? Like, for instance, the first thing that we do is a herd observation. That's usually our very first lesson, is a herd observation. So we'll bring horses in one at a time. And typically we'll bring our most anxious horse in first. And so we tell the kids, so first of all, let me back up. So we first talk about that, ask them, do you know, are horses a predator or are they prey animals?
Wow, are they either? I mean, they probably, I would say prey.
You're right.
Okay.
What?
They don't eat, they're not predators. They don't eat meat.
No.
I mean, they.
Right. Even though they're a 1,000-pound animal, they are prey animals. So they're always on high alert. And that's one thing I learned about kids in poverty when I was working with them, because a lot of them I worked one-on-one with, after school, or mentored them. And
they're always on high alert.
They are. And I would notice that. It would be like, they would notice things so much quicker than me. And I know they're younger, but it would be like, and they had to.
They had to.
They knew, and that's how horses are, so horses, and I say that too, because people used to ask me, I say I'm not a horse person, but people used to ask me early on, well, why don't you use dogs? They're a lot cheaper. And I really didn't have a good answer. I'm like, well, but not everybody sees dogs, but not everybody gets to work with horses, and they're big and they're cool and they're kind of intimidating. But what I learned was that horses, the difference is because horses are prey animals and dogs are predators. They will kill a bird or a rabbit or whatever and eat it, and horses don't. So they're always looking around. So these kids, a lot of the kids that we work with are prey. They are neglected, some of them. Many of them are abused. And so they just relate. And that's the other thing I noticed early on, way before the horse ranch, is kids in poverty love animals. I can't think of any that I know of that don't love animals. You know, now some of them come to the horse ranch. Some are scared of the horses.
I'm sure they are. Yeah.
And a lot of times it's the boys and the tough boys, and they're like,
They're big.
yeah, yeah. But once they get up and close, you know, to the horses, usually it only takes one time. So, well, will you walk up there? I'll walk up there with you. And we'll walk up there, and they start petting the horse, and we start talking to them about the horse, and it all changes. Even that first visit.
Well, and you have a very special variety of horses here too. That these are horses that they're made for kids. I mean, they're docile and they are great partners for kids, especially in a therapeutic way.
You're right, absolutely right. And actually, all of these horses were donated to us. Some of them are older, and they were hand chosen by the person that donated them. So she knew that they had that, you know, the right kind of personality to work with the kids. But we do want, now, she didn't donate these two. They were donated, these two minis. But they do all have different personalities.
I bet they do.
I told you guys earlier that, you know, Jethro is he's just an instigator. He's just on.
Jethro, that's a stinker.
Bossy?
Yeah.
Everybody's in everybody's business.
Oh, yeah. And he thinks he's the alpha. Even with the big horses, he will.
Jethro, you're not dad.
It's just so fun. But he's great in a herd observation, because we have like two different lots, you know, the east lot and the west lot. We say the east lot are the hard keepers. They're older, their food and stuff, but is special. But so we bring all of those in. Well, one time we were doing a team building and leadership session, and we had Jethro was in with Reno.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Reno.
Typically, he's with Reno, and they play fight all the time.
Reno.
So that's what we're used to.
Where's Reno?
Well, we did a team building exercise, and we decided to bring him in with some of the Westlaw horses. And so Molly here, she's our most anxious horse. And
She's beautiful.
Yeah.
Of course, this is Molly. Pretty. So Molly and Jethro.
So they were in, and they started. We thought they were play fighting, and this was a business. We provide. Let me just say, back up here a minute too. We provide all of our services free for kids because they don't have any money. So we're starting a new program called Team Building and Leadership, and we've brought businesses in. We've had First Farmers Bank executive team. We've had Farm Bureau corporate office from Indianapolis came up, and then we've had AMI. But it was Farm Bureau, this executive team that was up, and we were doing this team building, and we had Jethro in with Molly, and they're not used to being in the same lot, but it was kind of good because you want a little interaction. That's what you use with this team building exercise. So Molly lays down, the big horse lays down to roll, and of course Jethro goes over and starts biting at her tail, and we're all sitting there, oh well, there's Jethro, you know,
just being a little
but
stinker.
she keeps biting and biting and biting, and pretty soon we hear this loud squeal from Molly.
Oh no!
And it's like. And so Heather, the program director, she goes over, takes Jethro away on a lead rope because they're loose in there. And it finally, Molly lays there for a while, and we're like, okay, what's going on? She finally gets up, and she's fine. She's okay. But now remember, she's our most anxious horse too. Personally, I still think she was just scared to death. I really think that's why she just lay there she was like almost...
Like she felt like she was being attacked.
Yes, and you know, this is how this stuff works. Now, these were adults, but it works the same for the kids. So when everything's settled down, and Heather goes over to this team of professionals, and she says, so does this represent anything to you guys as your team, as your executive team? And they're all standing there going...
Like what?
Absolutely.
Yep.
We just had this happen. She goes they said we had our leader. I don't know if it was a CEO, but somebody that I believe it was their CEO. And I believe it was during COVID because this was shortly after COVID. And they said he was out. He was down. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a health issue. I don't know what it was. But someone else in the organization came in just like Jethro and tried to take over. So that started this. You can see how this works.
Oh, yeah.
It was
biting tails.
It just brought up this that none of them had really discussed. And I mean, they were really you can see that it was still right there at the top of their minds, that it was still an emotional experience from what had happened in their office. It was so emotional that it was a week or two later that we had someone videoing this. We let them do this for free because we needed to be able to record this and put it on our website. So it was a few weeks later when our guy that was doing the videoing went to the CFO, a bean counter, somebody that's usually, they're not real emotional usually, just to get him to talk about his experience when they were out there with his team building. And if it's on our website, you can go watch it. It's condensed down, but you can see him almost get emotional. Wow. And they cut and go, you can see where it cuts, but he gets that emotional still talking about that experience. Wow. But they were all able to come together. And then we did exercises after that showed them how can you work together better as a team. And those are the same things that we do with the kids. So what we do with the kids, like I say, it's for adults, it's for anybody. We've just chosen to focus on these kids.
So how does the process work? Is it a referral type program? If you have a kiddo that you think might benefit from it, can you put them into a program?
Yeah. We multiple ways. When it first started, people used to ask me that all the time. Well, how do you get the kids? It's like, I've got more kids. How do I get people to help? So because I just got to know that when it's like I said, it's a different culture, but I knew the kids, and then those kids recommend, or they have other friends. And then there's people in the community. It's working with the community because I don't know if you guys know Angie Sanders, but she's the homework club teacher there at Garden Square. And so from day one, I didn't have a van to take kids. This was just a little thing. It was just a way to keep these kids coming. I never ever thought about doing anything like this, but Angie had the van. So she's been there from day one, and she brought the kids in the van. I love it. So, she knows kids. She brings the kids still to this day. And those kids that I started with literally now are in their early to mid-20s.
Wow.
Two of them have kids of their own that are now 5 and 6, and those kids are coming to the ranch.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is definitely cool.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if they ever considered offering this through the school system.
Funny you should ask. We are a faith-based program. So it is, it's been difficult for us to get grants because people don't give to, quote, religious organizations. Last year, the state of Indiana, and most people don't, even the schools didn't know this, there was a new law passed. It's HB 1137 is the law. And it states that if a parent wants a child to be pulled from public schools, they can have up to 120 minutes a week to go to a church bus or a church or a religious organization for schooling. The school can't pay for it, and it has to be off property, but they can have that time. So believe it or not, last spring, well, it was before last spring, it was last fall, it was in another meeting that I go to, and the superintendent of Taylor Schools was there. And he was talking about their dilemma that they're losing the COVID money for behavioral specialists, and they've got all these kids that are just a mess, and he didn't know what they were going to do. And I remember I was like, I waited till he was done talking. I kind of raised my hand. I'm like, I got an idea. Because the kids he was describing to this huge group of people was the kids we see.
Yep.
And he didn't have a clue. He didn't know anything about us. And I told him about us and met with him later. So last spring, we had our first group of kids come from Taylor.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Out to the horse ranch, and we get to see them for an hour. And it's amazing. We've got them back, a different group. Some of them are the same kids, but we're seeing them again this fall. I think we had 9, I believe, that we had in the class last week. It's a new behavioral specialist that they have at their school. And it was his first time at the ranch, and he just stood there amazed. And he's like,
that's great.
This is awesome. Look at what you guys are doing with these horses and these kids. This is just amazing.
That is great.
So it really is, and it's hard to explain. I mean, I can sit here and tell you all of these things and how it works, but until you see it working, it's hard to really understand. We've got some videos that help, but and then just 2 weeks ago, we've got our second school. and they're coming from another county. It's Lewis Cass, and they are bringing high school students that are in an alternative class. Same thing. They love it. These kids love it because it gets them, a lot of these kids, they feel like they don't fit in. They just don't. And a lot of the not those high school kids at Lewis Cass, but a lot of the kids we work with, they live in poverty, and we think, well, we got sports, we've got all this, but all that stuff costs money.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to get to and from practices. And that city bus doesn't, it doesn't go after 5, 6 o'clock, I think. And if practices are late, they don't have any way to get to and from this stuff. They don't have the money for uniforms. They don't have. And so this is something they can come to, and they get to know horses.
Right.
And eventually they get to ride, but not at first. We do 6-week sessions, and they come for an hour and 15 minutes once a week. And so they have to come for at least 2 6-week sessions, because that's the equine assisted learning. That's where we're really doing the stuff, working on behavior, working on team building, working on, how do you read body language? How do you talk? How can you be kind? How can you respect using these horses?
Do they get to ride the minis?
Yeah. I mean, no. Nobody rides the minis.
Well, wait a minute.
Well, you know what? There are some people that have little miniatures. We don't. But there are. But it would be like toddlers.
I know.
And
Look,
Your legs are on the ground.
Yeah. But we do work with kids as young as from 4 to 19 years old. So
that's great.
Yeah.
That's really great. So when we talk about the public, how can we help you? What can we do to help Narrowgate?
Donations, website.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we are fully funded on donations at this point because these kids don't have any money. And even honestly, when you compare this to other organizations that are similar, which really don't do exactly what we're doing, or at least they're not that and faith-based. I mean, we're talking, it would be like, we figured probably almost $63 each time for a kid to come.
Horses are expensive and they eat a lot.
They do.
And they need places to stay that are warm.
They do.
Yeah.
So if you don't have income, a lot of nonprofits have income. The Y, you get a Y membership. If, Boy Scouts, you have dues, you have all these things, and we don't have an income. That's why I mentioned even like this team building and leadership. That's what we're hoping to build. And by the way, those 2 that came that we said you get to come for free because, we're going to use you for our marketing and advertising. They did give us a nice check.
That's great.
So it really was impactful, and the kids love it. And it is faith-based. We literally do. We pray with the kids when we get there, and we tell them, these are big animals, so they can be dangerous. I mean, you could get your foot stepped on or what. So we always pray, and we've got a prayer request board that the kids, if they want, they don't have to. They don't even have to pray with us if they don't want to. We don't make anybody do anything. A lot of these kids come, they're angry with God. Or even at the church, it's like, well, how could he be a good God? How could a good God let me live the way I'm living and be abused or neglected or what? And we recognize that. So we don't push anything on anybody. But what we hope is that when they come and connect first with the horse and then with their mentors and the facilitators, and they start to build that those relationships, that we just hope that they will see that, He is a good God, and they sense it. We hear it all the time. They tell us, and they don't even always know what it is, but they're like, I just like the way I feel when I'm there.
That's great.
They just need that reinforcement, encouragement, trust.
They do.
And love they're getting it from you all, and they're getting it from the animals.
Exactly. But it starts with the animals. They could care less about coming and seeing me. They're not going to
They're getting it from Pumpkin and Jeffra.
But they need
saying.
They have to have somebody that teaches them what do I do with this big animal? And it's simple things. Like, for instance, here's another thing which is equine assisted learning that we learned at a training we went to, and it was like, duh, that is so simple, but it's so effective. And so it's just when you're teaching them how to groom, and there is a process, certain brushes, and we want them, you have to do it this way because we're teaching them things, there's a certain order to things.
Right.
So you take the curry comb and you kind of push kind of hard and you go in circles, and that gets the dirt to the surface. And then we have hard brush and a soft brush. The hard brush is next. And we let them feel it. Can you see the difference? Which one's the hard brush? And they'll pick the hard brush. So now you take that and you just kind of like flick your wrist. And all that dirt that's at the surface, you flick that off there. And then we have a soft brush. And then that soft brush, you just take these long strokes and that just makes the horse shine. So what we learned is during that, you can do something like, and you don't always do it. You kind of have to feel out the kid and that everything there in the moment. But you can say something like, yeah, this just gets the dirt to the surface. And I did this this was my first big experience that I really saw this work. And this was a few years ago. And I'm just learning this stuff. So I'm not really that good at it, but it's like I've learned this. This is an easy one. So I'm sitting there and I've known this little girl for about 2 weeks. And she had been at Kinsey. So we're sitting there grooming together. And I just felt like the time was right. She's on my right and we're both grooming. And I said, this just gets the dirt to the surface. And I'm looking at the horse and she's looking. And I just kept looking at the horse. And I said, so what gets the dirt to the surface in your life? And she stopped. And she looked at me and she said, I don't really know what you mean by that. And I didn't look at her. I just kept on grooming. And I said, well, like, what pushes your buttons? Oh, she just started, and she was junior high age. I think she was 13 or 14. She starts going on telling me this story. I don't look at her. I just continue.
Right.
Inside, I'm going, oh, dear Lord, what do I say? Because I didn't know what to say. But she keeps talking and talking. And as she's talking, I'm like, wait a minute. I know this story. This has been in the news. I mean, like Channel 6, Kokomo Tribune, radio. And it was bad, something that happened. And I don't want to get into all the details, but there was a death in this situation that happened in Kokomo to a teenager. Nobody knew her. Nobody knew anything about her, but she was in the middle of that story. And it was like, so it was shattering. And what could have happened. You've got a kid having to deal with this stuff. And I don't want to get into all the details. There was a lot there. But I was just standing there and I just let her talk. I thought, okay, I just need to let her get this out. So this is how these horses work.
Right,
these horses, and this horse is not there because she's since retired, but she was my favorite horse. She was our oldest, like 30-some years old.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my.
And she was blind in one eye. But so this little girl, we come over, I said, okay, so she had never even led the horse before. And this is a pretty good sized horse. And I said, okay, we're going to lead the horse around the arena. So we're walking her, and I'm letting her have the lead rope, but I've got my elbow right here because I kept feeling like she was going to get her feet stepped on. So it was kind of like all the way around the arena. And I'm like, I was so glad when we got all the way around because it was wearing me out. But then we're standing there talking about this, and all of a sudden this horse takes her head. I didn't even think this horse, she was so old and arthritic. I'm like, I didn't even think she could move her head that far. But the little girl's right next to her, and she's like, does this around the little girl. I mean, literally did a 180.
Like a hug?
It's exact. But I'm new at this. I'm sitting there going, she's like, oh, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. I said, I think she's wanting to tell you something. What do you think she's trying to tell you? And she says, I don't know. And I said, I don't know either. And she did it again. She did it like 3 times.
Wow.
Then I am a little slow, but it sunk in. She's trying to hug her.
It's a horse hug.
It was a horse hug. And I'm like, I think she wants to be alone with you. And sometimes you just have to take a little bit of a risk. And we had just had this awkward walk around the arena. I said, do you want to take her by yourself? And I'm a little bit like, and she's like, yeah, I think so. I'm like, okay. So I handed her the lead rope and she takes off walking very smooth. And I'm standing back there praying, oh, Lord, don't let anything happen. She gets about 1/4 of the way around the arena and she just stops and she hugs that horse and loves on that horse. And I was just standing there melting.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
And
That's the stuff.
Yeah.
We can't make this happen.
It is one of many stories. You guys are helping so many people, kids especially, out at Narrowgate Horse Ranch. And like you mentioned earlier, you operate on donations. How do we donate? How do we get a hold of you? How do we find out more information?
Well, we have a website, And it's our name, narrowgatehorseranch.com. It's long, but it's in there. And we have, the different tabs. There's one to donate, and there's one if you want to. You ask, I didn't finish talking about if a kid wants to come, we just say go to the website. There's an application. They can go on there. They sign a release form. And then we have an admissions coordinator now. Everybody there is part-time.
Yeah.
The first until not quite 2 years ago, everybody there was a volunteer. That's how we've been able to do what we've been able
That's
to
incredible.
do.
That's
But
awesome.
They can go on and they sign up, and then the admissions coordinator will contact the parents and find out when can you come. Then we find out when can the volunteers come, because they're still mostly volunteers. So we have to pair them up, figure out the times for the volunteers, and then we have to try to get kids that are in about the same age range, maybe have about the same kind of situations that they're going through.
Right.
And we have to match all of that up.
Wow. It's a lot of work. It requires a lot of time, a lot of volunteers out at Narrowgate Horse Ranch. And we're so happy you're here in our community, Susan.
Exciting.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing these
May I
pictures.
say one last thing? And you asked me earlier, and then I forgot. We do have an event coming up, but it's not until next May.
Okay.
We have our yearly fundraiser, the Derby Ball.
Oh, yeah.
May 3rd. We live stream the Kentucky Derby. Women can wear big hats. It's a formal / semi-formal event. And it's just fun. It's a dinner dance. The last 2 years we've had kids come in and actually tell their stories.
Wow.
And that has been, you get a group of 300 people. You can't hear, it's just loud. But when those kids get up to speak, you could hear a pin drop. And people, just because these are pretty passionate stories that these kids are, and it's hard for the kids. Here you have kids from poverty getting up in front of all these people dressed up, and speaking and telling their story. But it's pretty awesome.
It is. It sounds amazing. It really does. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, Susan. You're doing such great work, and we can't wait to hear more about it. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Give Pumpkin a kiss for me.
That's right. We definitely do.
Oh my
Maybe we'll have to have
gosh.
Chicken on next time with us.
We could do that.
Right. We could do that. We could. Thank you so much for watching. This has been The Ripple Effect. I'm Jessica Ausbrook. This is Kim Graves. We're from Solidarity Community Federal Credit Union. Thank you so much for watching.